Okay, welcome back. Sorry, my screensaver went on. I actually pressed a button to stop the screensaver, and I actually accidentally clicked on the part that stops the video. So, unfortunately, that was okay. Part B you just saw. Now we're on part C. Okay, let me continue right where I was. Okay, once again, a trick. You make each of them concentrate more on the tasks for which they have a comparative advantage. Not only that, here's the even special insight on doing these, make it the problem even easier. Find the person or the country that has the absolute disadvantage on both. Okay, turns out it's Brown who has that. Make him concentrate more on his comparative advantage. Not only that, make him go all the way. Make that person spend all of his time on the task for which he has a comparative advantage. Okay, so what that means is what we're going to do is we're going to do the new production technique. Brown, we're going to make him spend all of his time on stout. So he's going to produce 0 lager and 4 stout. Okay, so now we need to specify Jones. Okay. Sorry. So Jones was spending 4 on lager, 3 on stout. We're going to make that lager a little bit higher, the stout a little bit lower. And the key is we're going to first have to we want him to have a specification of lager and stout so that we need the total amounts have to be bigger than before. Okay, so the total amount of lager was 5.5. We got to make it bigger than 5.5. So let's pick 6. Let's see if we can do something. Let's try a random number, see if it works. So I'm going to make Jones produce 6 gallons of lager. So that means he's spending 60% of his time now on lager. So 6 lager. So if he's spending 60% of his time on lager, that means 40% on stout. 40% of the time on stout means he can only make 2 gallons of stout now. Okay, so 2 gallons of stout. Okay. We're on our way. Notice that we have now specified things so the total amount of lager, total amount of stout is bigger than before. Total amount of lager was 5.5, now it's 6, because 6 was 0, 6. The total amount of stout was 5, now it's going to be 6. Okay. Now all we have to do is specify a way of trading to make both of them better off. So remember, case 1, this was the original way. Let's now make Jones and Brown better off. One way we can do that is if we make Jones give 1 3/4 of his gallons to Brown. So if Jones does that, Jones will have 6 minus 1 3/4, that's 4 1/4. 4 1/4 is bigger than 4. Brown will get 1 3/4. 1 3/4 is bigger than 1.5. Okay, so what we do is first we tell Jones give 1 3/4 gallons of lager to Brown, and we tell Brown, let's make them both better off. Okay, so Jones before had 3 of stout. Let's make him give 1.5. Brown, give 1.5 gallons of stout to Jones. Okay, so what we've done is we have said we're the benevolent dictator. Before, this is what they were producing. Now we're telling them produce different amounts, and we've told them to give to each other. But that's the same way. It's the same thing as trading. Okay, we said tell Jones give 1.5, 1 3/4 to Brown. Telling Brown you must give 1.5 to Jones. But it's exactly the same. We said, hey, trade. We say, Jones, trade 1 3/4 of your lager for 1.5 gallons of um, Brown's stout. Okay, trade those amounts. You will end up, okay, the result, call it case 2. Put that in blue. The result will be now Jones he produced 6, but he gave 1 3/4 to Brown, so Jones will have 4 1/4 lager. Okay. Meanwhile, he produced 2 stout, but then Brown gives him 1.5 stout, and he's going to have 3.5 gallons of stout. Meanwhile, Brown starts off with 0 lager, but Jones gave him 1 3/4. 1 3/4 lager. And he started off with 4 gallons of stout, but he had to give 1.5 to Jones, so 4 minus 1.5 is 2.5. And let's make sure this worked, okay? So the result, under this new way of producing, and after trading, the result is Jones has 4.5 lager, 3.5 stout, and he strictly prefers that. Note that's more of each. Okay, if you're doing this on a test and you just made Jones have exactly the same amount of lager but more of stout, that would also be, we would say he's better off with that. He's strictly better off. Okay, but here we actually made it so he had more of each, more lager and more stout. Meanwhile, what happened to Brown? Brown has 1 3/4 lager, more lager than before, and 2.5 of stout, more stout than before. Both of them have more of each than before. Okay, so that's the point of this. By telling them change your production amounts so that you concentrate more on your comparative advantage, then do just the right trade, you can both become better off. And that's the whole point of the law of comparative advantage. Okay, I'm going to end there. So that is the lecture. That's part A, B, and C. I'm going to have a part C. I'm going to do one homework problem. Okay, so I hope that one in a sense is optional, but hope you'll still look for it. Okay, see you there maybe, and if not, see you at session 3.